Absolutely still possible. Wilson wins again. The Spider Queen is pretty easy to fight as long as you don't let her spawn too many spiders. They added a fire version of the sleep dart, but once again, kiting is far easier than crafting whatever this is. In order to obtain a fire dart, you have to catch these red birds. The birds themselves are actually quite rare, as you mostly find crows, but even catching them is not enough, as you then have to pray you get the stupidly low chance for a red feather, all to craft a fire dart that does less damage than a punch to the face. 1250 health later, and you don't get anything interesting. Originally, the spider hat was actually a craftable item, and wow is it fun to use. You can trick the spiders into thinking you're one of them with this hat. Is the tall bird being ugly again? Well, with this hat, you can lead the spiders and completely obliterate him. You can also use the hat to raid pig villages, but be cautious, as the pigs will also believe you're a spider, causing them to attack you. This gameplay idea was so good that they later turned it into an entire character. They also added a TF2 unusual to the game. Winter was far from finished at this stage, so the winter hat doesn't have a proper gameplay purpose. However, wearing it gives us a sneak peek as to what the season would look like and sound like, which is really cool. Turf. This update was hinted on the forums, as connecting all the capital letters in this blog post gives you the word shovel. And what do you know, in the next update you can dig up turf with a shovel. But what a big feature this is. I don't think Don't Starve would be the game it is today if you couldn't customize the ground under you. It helps make bases have their own distinct feel, as before this, even day 100 bases looked identical to each other. The update after that is quite game changing, but before I talk about it, I have to show you the insanity that are these update trailers. One of the main rules of Don't Starve is to not let the player see everything, but another way Don't Starve achieves this goal is by hiding little ARGs in update videos. Clay released updates every 2 weeks, but they kept the community active every day with these puzzles. Usually it's something basic like in the Spider Queen trailer where you have Morse code playing in the background. And other times you have red dots that randomly appear for a frame, and if you screenshot them all and overlay them over each other and connect the dots, you get this strange creature. No one knew what it was at the time. Could it be an evil frog? Is this what Deerclops looks like? Oh, no way, it's just Chester. Food will now spoil. Anything you stockpiled in your megabase will soon turn to rot. This mechanic is quite unique, in that we have definitive proof it was originally a community idea that got added to the game. The developers always wanted to add it, but just weren't sure how. But with a bit of help from the community, we got probably the best addition to the game: food spoilage. One of the common things you would see on the forums whenever a new threat was added is a concern from a new player. Here I am struggling to survive, and now you're adding something to make it harder. It made the idea of getting into Don't Starve at this stage somewhat unappealing, as you had to learn completely new game mechanics every other week. Otherwise you would be left behind and unable to play. It would feel like the features are designed around veterans who are already used to the game while disregarding new players. Spoilage was not one of those mechanics. If anything, spoilage only hurt veterans of the game, as it made it harder, if not impossible, to stockpile food. New players wouldn't notice their food rotting, as they'd eat it before it had a chance to spoil. This change was solely made to prevent high amounts of stockpiling, which is great. But just like when hounds were added, there's ways to counter this. For example, you could craft an icebox to slow food spoilage. You could cook food to restore its freshness. And just to balance everything out, the default hunger was increased from 100 to 150. If you still really hated the mechanic, you had options, as you could always play the new robot character who completely ignores this mechanic. We are fully in the mid-game phase at this point. The first 10 days or so will always be consistent, so the new player experience doesn't change, while spoilage, hounds, Krampus, and the Spider Queen would affect players after day 10 to challenge those that survived longer. This principle applies to other things in this update. Beefaloes will now go into heat, making them renewable, while also attacking the player if they get too close. And those small birds you hatched a few updates ago, they will now grow up and kill you. Even less reason to hatch them. You could say that by raising this egg, I lost a lot of progress. this is when the world generation got added, which makes the game look closer to what Don't Starve is like today. Other additions include a new character, pre-crafting, baby beefaloes, walls, boomerangs, and koalefants. From how bad the walls are, it might seem like the developers are against building a base, but that's actually not the case. They are against turtling.
Some people in the forums and online I've seen think that we're against base building, but we're definitely not. We're trying to make the game less turtley. But that just means we want you to make a base and like go out and explore, and then come back to your base, and then go out and explore, and come back to your base. But
Don't Starve at its core is a sandbox, so it's easy to argue that there's no correct way to play the game. And while that may be true, I do think there is a two-stage cycle that every player has to follow. In the first stage, the player explores the map and collects any resources that could be helpful later. In the second stage, the player returns to their base and uses those resources to improve their odds of survival. Eventually, the player will need to leave their base and return to the dangerous wilderness, which is when the cycle repeats. The Koalefant Trail is the perfect example of this in action. You'll be sitting in your base when suddenly a trail spawns near you. Following the trail into the wild leads you to a deadly beast. Killing that beast gives you meat, so you can survive longer, and a trunk which you might use to craft a clothing item. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the original concept for Don't Starve is nothing like the one we have now, but when you examine the game further, it's clear the core loop of build a base, go on adventure run before returning to improve your base still exists even in the latest versions. This seems to be the main goal of the progress update, refine Don't Starve to a point where the only things left to add are the end game challenges, and it succeeds at that. In this update, the spider's webbing counts as turf, and you can dig it up and place it wherever you want. However, destroying the nest doesn't destroy the webbing, making it super annoying to move around. Eventually, there's just random patches of webbing around the world slowing you down. Then there's the confusing features. Punching a butterfly in this version gives you 25 health. You eat 6 butterflies and suddenly you're at full health. Gold is still a random drop, by the way. They've had 2 boulder sprites for ages, but I suppose nobody thought of the idea to use them for something. And research points are finally removed. Sort of. I guess Clay was just really scared of the #1 research points fan emailing them a pipe bomb because it's a setting in this update. It's technically gone, but with this one setting you can enable it again, so what's the point of removing it? Just remove it and stop trying to achieve this dumb middle ground. Anyways, Progress did add one feature that would indicate the beginning of the end game, the things. They are literally called the things. The things in this version all spawn in one biome, and if you combine them all at a machine, you get to completely regenerate your world while keeping your items. The teleportato was added to solve a multitude of problems, the smallest one being to add some sort of end goal to Don't Starve. Have you done everything you wanted to do in this world? Well, now you can move on to the next one as well as switch character if you want. It also serves as a way to renew unrenewable resources, whether it's used to get more rocks or to spawn more beefalo because you killed them all. Or maybe it's just to experience new content that was added after you generated your world, but its main purpose was to solve the character XP problem. The way you unlock characters in Don't Starve is by gaining XP. The amount you gain is equivalent to the amount of days you survived. The problem is that you have to die to get the XP. You could survive all the way to day 1000, but unless you die and lose the world, you won't get any XP.
But the side effect of this is that you have to die in order to unlock characters, and people don't want to do that. But so there's something fundamentally unsatisfying for most people to have to actually get their character to die in order to progress. So we're probably going to change that.
The solution to this was to give the player XP for regenerating the world, which lets good players still unlock new characters without having to die. As for the trailer, they hid a now defunct QR code which would hint at the next update. That being... Insanity and Winter are the two big features that keep being teased on the forums, and I believe this version of Don't Starve is the hardest one in existence. No update before or after this one comes close in terms of difficulty, and that all comes down to how absolutely broken Insanity is. They added a few creepy stuff like eyes that watch you in the dark, shadowy hands that steal your fire, and distortion effects I had to turn off in case I gave someone a seizure, but nothing compares to what happens when you're at 0 sanity. The shadow creatures that spawn are ridiculous. This is the stats of a modern shadow creature, and these are the stats of the Insanity update ones. Crawlers have 800 health, which is more than a beefalo, while the Terror Beak does 80 damage and attacks about as fast as Krampus, that being extremely fast. If that wasn't bad enough, up to 4 creatures could spawn at once, and they spawn really quickly. Kill one crawler and another one will instantly respawn in its place. You don't even get sanity for killing them, giving you no reason to fight them unless you really want nightmare fuel to craft the new items. But trust me, you aren't winning the battle against these guys. Friendly mobs can't see them, and they can't be put to sleep. So the only way to kill nightmares is to attempt to kite them, which will just get you killed. This all sounds incredibly challenging, and that's because it is. However, there is one easy solution that completely nullifies everything I just talked about, and that's to just not be insane. It is very much easier done than said. In this version, top hats, while expensive, did not have durability, and wearing one would give you a passive sanity boost, which works during the day, dusk, and even at night. Meaning, once you craft a top hat, you will never be insane for the rest of your playthrough. There is other ways to increase sanity, like eating cooked berries, or eating the new taffy and pumpkin cookies, but crafting the top hat is by far the easiest and requires no maintenance. Insanity sounds like the developer's solution to making the game less combat-oriented. While Winter and Spoilage are meant to make you think about how and when you farm, Sanity makes you consider which battles are worth taking. The simple reason for this is that standing near monsters lowers your sanity. By fighting tentacles or spiders, you are lowering your sanity, and doing that too much causes 4 terror beaks to spawn. Conversely, getting pig followers gives you sanity, and stuff like traps and blow darts won't lower your sanity as you are too far from the monster to be affected by their passive terrain. If there was a version where Don't Starve was the least combat oriented, this would be the version. It's not that you can't fight monsters, it's just that you have to either use unconventional tactics or just not kill everything that enters your screen. It also refined other aspects of the game, like encouraging players to cook their meat instead of eating it raw, or just as a cost for using wormholes. And surprisingly, people really liked Insanity. Sure, there was the one guy who was asking to make it a setting, but for the most part, people were happy about the direction Don't Starve was taking. Adventure mode. Speaking of adventure mode, you can play an early version of it now, and completing it gives you this placeholder ending place. They didn't want to spoil the ending yet, so they made Maxwell a cardboard cutout that doesn't talk and can't be interacted with. The only way to leave this place is to eat the deadly feast sitting on the floor. Adventure mode wouldn't be properly added until a month later. In the meantime, it's time for Winter. Winter was the developer's ultimate counter to farming. In a post by Kevin, he explains how there shouldn't be one answer that is right for every situation, which is pretty much farming right now. Sure, it isn't the cheapest thing, but once you get it set up, you never have to worry about getting food. There's no pressure to find an alternate food source, because the farms are the one easy answer to hunger that always works. In his eyes, farming is a perfectly valid food source, but it shouldn't work 100% of the time, which is where Winter comes in. Nothing will grow except trees, forcing you to find different food sources. You also freeze to death now. Sucks to suck. Winter is mostly the same as it is in modern Don't Starve, except here thermal stones had yet to be added. The only time I had issues is when I tried to kill the new McTusk, because this walrus is better at the game than me. McTusk feels like an actual player that's just closed competitive CSGO. He's constantly kiting my attacks while sneaking in his blow darts to hit me. It's like the developers were so sick of their community kiting everything they add to death that they added something that kites the player. But eventually, after nearly dying to the Pingu Walrus, I killed him. Which is when I learned that the Tusk is completely useless because the walking cane had yet to be added. What a fantastic game. At least I can freeze stuff with the new ice staffs. Why is the screen shaking? This is Deerclops, and he is genuinely terrifying. Anyone who's played this game for long enough has experienced what I'm talking about. Thinking you finally mastered the game, and then the ground starts shaking before this ginormous entity appears, destroys your campfire and your base, and then you're dead. This is like the final boss version of dying to the Gru on night 1. Once you kill this guy, you've officially conquered the game, because if you've made it this far, then nothing else will kill you. Winter would be the last big thing added before adventure mode. Now it was time to patch up the game and get ready for launch. They were so close to launch that they even made a trailer setting up the backstory to the game, and it is just beautiful. It was so good looking that even back then, people were asking for a Don't Starve animated series in this style. But before we can release the game, you really thought that they wouldn't try to add more challenges to the game? Now it will occasionally lightly rain, which slightly lowers your sanity and slowly kills your fires. Yeah, no, this is just winter, but infinitely less threatening. Wetness is barely a mechanic in this update. The actual content is all the key items they added to the game, like the Clockwork Knight and therefore gears, which currently look like my dog's vomit. Merms, guard pigs, drying racks, honey poultice, gunpowder, an umbrella, purple gems, fire staffs, an entirely new magic station, and 3 different mushrooms that come out at different times of day. Though unfortunately the option to cook them isn't there yet, so only the blue mushroom is of any use. And then there's the most important item introduced in this update, the Hambat. This weapon was so awesome that on the same day this update came out, it was also added into Team Fortress 2 with the Wilson Weave. The Hambat is such a strong weapon that I can simultaneously kill Deerclops and Heavy at the same time, although the Hambat sucks in this version. For some reason it has both durability and can spoil, and if you weren't careful you could actually eat your Hambat. I imagine they had to remove this because people kept